Okay, so this is my like third time trying to film this video, right? And so I have an emotional support chihuahua who farts. So this is Pedro. Pedro is going to be my buddy because I'm starting to feel a little bit anxious, starting to feel a little bit discouraged because I can't seem to connect my brain and my mouth today. Pedro's going to be our mascot today. So hi, how are you doing? My name is Joe. It's July, so we need to do our mid-year book check-in. People have been posting their mid-year book freakout tags, right? And I'm not going to do that because there's some of the questions that I just don't have an answer to. Like, I'm not somebody who cares about new releases. I'm not really anticipating any releases. You know, if a book's not out yet, it's not really on my radar, as well as the fact that based on the books that I've read this year, I don't have any fictional crushes. So what I have for you today is kind of like a general stats situation at the beginning. Then I have my top 5, I have my bottom 5, and then I have a couple of the questions from the mid-year book freakout tag that I do actually have answers to, so we're going to talk about those as well. So this is the first year that I actually set a goal on Goodreads, like a number goal. Normally I always put them at 1 because I don't know if I thought I was better than everybody else, but I was like, I already completed my goal on the first day of January. But this is my first year actually setting a goal, and my goal was 80 books. And so far at this moment in time, we're sitting at 68 things that I've read so far. 23 of them were manga, and I read those in January. It was an Attack on Titan phase that I have since gotten over because the story was starting to go in a way that I just kept pissing me off. So I quit that, and I might go back to that. I might not. It doesn't really matter. I've also read 45 novels as well this year. So I think that's pretty good. I think that's pretty solid. And this is also my first year keeping a spreadsheet. So according to my spreadsheet, I am sitting at 22,994 pages read so far this year. My average rating, according to my spreadsheet again, is a 3.86. I feel like I'm becoming a little bit more strict on how I rate things, and I'm getting more comfortable with rating things below 3 stars because for a long time, 3 stars was like the lowest that I would go in my ratings because I was afraid. I don't know. I was afraid that you would judge me if I rated a book 2.5 stars, but now I'm like, you get a 2 star, 2.5 stars. I'm just going with it, you know? That's a long drawn out way to say that my average rating for this year is 3.86, which I think is pretty good. So now we're gonna get into my bottom 5 of the year. These are not bad books by any means. If you love these books, I'm so happy for you. They just didn't work for me for whatever reason, and I'm apparently here now to tell you the reason that they didn't work for me. So number 5, we have Gerald's Game by Stephen King. I am currently in my Stephen King renaissance, which you will see later on in the video. I'm obsessed with this man, but this one just didn't work for me. So just like bare bones what this book is about, this woman and her husband are trying some kinky stuff in the bedroom. She ends up getting handcuffed to the bed while he has a heart attack and dies on the floor, so she is pretty much trapped. And as we go through this book, you know, she is starting to come to terms with some of the things that happened to her as a child. I feel like I would have liked this a lot more if it was more of a short story type of situation. We got to a certain point that it felt like we were having the same conversations over and over and over again, and we were kind of dealing with the same struggles over and over and over again, that I kind of just got sick of our main character. I got sick of the voices that she's hearing in her head, having these conversations, trying to get her to remember what happened to her in the past and confront it head on while she's chained to this bed. I just got tired of it. You know, there were parts of it that I really enjoyed, but those parts were few and far between. We would have a great couple of pages, and then it would just be like 50 pages of, oh my God, get me out of here. The next one is Thinner by Richard Bachman, which is also conveniently Stephen King. I promise you, I'm in my Stephen King renaissance. We'll talk about him in a little bit. This one wasn't so much a disappointing read as I just hated the main character. I just found Billy Halleck to be such an insufferable character to follow, and I don't think that he is meant to be likable because the circumstances which led about to the issue in this is that Billy Halleck ended up hitting and killing a woman with his car, and I think it's her husband or her son, something like that. I can't really quite remember, but that man is a Roma man, and he ends up cursing Billy Halleck, and so he just starts to lose weight at an uncontrollable pace, right? And so I don't think Billy Halleck is supposed to be a likable character, and I'm not opposed to following people that are unlikable. I just think that Billy Halleck just kind of crossed into the territory of I just hated being inside this guy's head. I hated following him. I did not like him. The story itself is not the best. It kind of goes in a weird direction about halfway through. We add in this like mafia guy who starts going on a rampage. I don't know. It's just very strange. And by the end of it, I was just like, what the heck did I just read? I have no idea, but there we go. Number 3 on the bottom 5 is This Could Be Us by Kennedy Ryan. It's the second book to before I let go, this one is following a friend of the first lady, and her name's Soledad, and she's got some issues. She's got some issues with her marriage based on the marketing, what I was hearing about it, based on, you know, the rest of Kennedy Ryan's work. I was thinking that this was going to be a romance, right? This is not a romance. This is a women's fiction book, and I'm not like a huge fan of women's fiction. I've read like maybe 3 or 4, but I felt like this was a book that really wanted to be women's fiction, but we forced a romance into it anyway for some reason. The Soledad's journey part, her kind of coming to terms with what her husband has done, kind of trying to heal herself, that was pretty good. And I think that if the story was just that, then I think that I would have liked it a lot better, and I would have known what to look for going into it. Whenever the romance would come into play, I just didn't like it. I didn't believe it. I didn't understand why we had to have it. And by the end of the book, I was just like, how did we get here? How did we get here? I don't believe that these two people want to be together, let alone are together, and it's working. I don't know. This one just, it missed the mark. I don't know where the mark was, but it missed it. Number 2 on this list is one that I actively just disliked, and that is The Last Battle by C.S. Lewis. I did a whole vlog reading the Chronicles of Narnia. I had some great expectations for the series, and The Last Battle is the last book in the Chronicles of Narnia series. This one came out of left field because I feel like the tone was completely different in this book. The racism was kicked up to the nth degree. I mean, we're following like this monkey who just has this idea to dress up this donkey as Aslan, and he teams up with these other brown people that smell like onions and garlic and just tries to destroy and murder and take over Narnia. Narnians, they have to come and save the day, and there is like a blackface situation or a brownface situation that happens. I don't know. It was darker than the rest of the books. I didn't understand what we were doing. I thought the plot was just absurd. It was just absurd. If you guys have seen the movie Horton Hears a Who, that very end scene when Horton is trying to show all of these people that there is this little town living on the dandelion, and the monkeys end up like trapping him and nobody's listening to him. That's how I felt while I was reading this book, because I felt like all of the characters were just so dumb. The guy that's supposed to be the king of Narnia, he was just a bumbling buffoon. He was just an idiot, and I was just so irritated the entire time that I was reading this book. Like I said, I did a vlog. I'll link it somewhere if I remember. And then my number 1 is the only one that is, this is the number 1. It's The Friend Zone by Abby Jimenez. I DNF'd this book. I read 40 pages of it, and it's the most ridiculously male-coded romance book that I've ever read in my life, and I absolutely hated it. Like I said, I read 40 pages. 40 pages. And I went on a whole rant to my mother. I went on a whole rant in my head. I went on a whole rant to Jen from the Book Refuge. I was just so unbelievably pissed off by this book. I read the Part of Your World trilogy by Abby Jimenez. I've read that this year. It was pretty good. I liked it for the most part. You know, I had some nitpicky things about it, but it was a good time. It was a great time. She can really write heroes. But this book was just absolutely ridiculous. I mean, we're introduced to this girl who has a whole-ass boyfriend. Of course, that is not the hero of the story. The hero of the story she meets after he rear-ends her. He rear-ends her, and then the only thing that he is focused on while he is trying to get her information and all of these different things that you do when you get into a car accident, he is just constantly talking about her butt. Her booty, oh my god, she's so round and plump and voluptuous, and I just want to grab a hold, you know? It's just gross. I don't know. I think that you can write attraction to a stranger in a more, I don't know, respectful manner, and then it just keeps going on, because the heroine, she is not like other girls, and she is the most not like other girls that I've ever read about. She beats out Bella Swan by a mile, because she is not like other girls, because she eats hamburgers, and she drinks beer, and she talks about sex, because, you know, that's just what she likes to talk about, and she just has her best friend clutching her pearls, because her best friend is like other girls. Like, one of the lines in here, let me see if I can find it, because it was just ridiculous. And then we have another scene where the heroine starts her period, and the hero, the guy that we're following, whatever his name is, so the hero goes out and gets her tampons, and they have this whole scene where she's like, my boyfriend, because remember, she has a whole ass boyfriend, my boyfriend would never go into a store and buy me feminine hygiene products. Like, that's like the hottest thing that he could do, is go into a store and buy a fucking box of maxi pads. She pretty much insinuates that he's good looking, right? And then he's like, so you think I'm sexy, huh? And she says, there's something you should know about me, Josh. I say what I think. I don't have a coy bone in my body. Yes, you're sexy. Enjoy the compliment, because you won't always like what I say to you, and I won't care one way or another if you do or don't. Like, what kind of a Wattpad bullcrap writing is that? I'm sorry. This was just so bad. Like, I quit when the hero goes and asks, like, a mutual friend of theirs if she would ever, like, consider cheating on her boyfriend with him. And then he's like, oh, I like that she's loyal. After the friend tells him, like, no, she's not gonna cheat on her boyfriend for you. He's like, oh yeah, I like that she's loyal. You literally just asked if she would cheat on somebody, but you like that she's loyal. Ugh, gross. Nope. Okay. So let's go on to a lighter note, shall we? Let's talk about the top 5. My throat is already starting to get a little dry. All right, Last Tale of the Flower Bride is my number 5 for the best of the year. I picked this up on a whim at the library. I've been trying to use my library more because I'm a broke bitch and the economy is not supporting my book buying habits. So I'm trying to use the library a little bit more. So in this, we're following a man who's never like directly named. He's just known as the bridegroom, and he's married to this woman who just does not talk about her past. It's like a no-go. We don't talk about the childhood, and he knows that if he ever starts to dig into her past, like, their marriage will just be over, right? She's very secretive about everything that happens, but they get along so well. All of this comes to a head when her aunt is on her deathbed and they decide to make the trip to her childhood home to go and visit this aunt for the last time. And of course, the bridegroom cannot help but start to dig. And the things that he finds are dark, they're gritty, they're kind of sad and depressing. This is a very atmospheric book. We have this perhaps haunted house, we have these secrets that we're trying to uncover, and of course we have this wife who just seems like she's very sketchy. She's just very sketchy. It's just very good. It was really good. It was one of those books that I couldn't wait to see what was going to happen, and I did not predict anything that was going to happen. And normally I'm a good predictor. Maybe I was just off my game that day. I don't know. It was one of those books that I could not wait to find out what was going to happen, but I really just didn't want it to end, and I love that feeling. I love that feeling. Number 4 on my best of the year so far is The Shining by Stephen King. I told you, I'm in my Stephen King renaissance. We're getting to the good stuff here. It was fantastic, and I think that it's on so many people's top 10 Stephen King books for a reason. It's a very slow burn book, and it's nothing like the movie. So if you watch the movie and you really like the movie, same girl, same, but this is nothing. Like, I can understand why Stephen King hates the movie so much, because there's a quote that I saw of him talking about the movie, and he pretty much said that the book is warm while the movie is cold. And that's kind of the vibe, okay? Because the book is more like a complex family drama set against the backdrop of this haunted hotel and all of the paranormal shenanigans that are going on, right? Jack Torrance is one of the most complex characters that I've ever read about. I mean, just watching him deal with his alcoholism and also his anger that are pretty much a direct line that you can trace back to his experiences with his father as a child. Wendy is such a strong female character, and learning about her relationship with her mother and how that affects how she interacts with Jack and also how she interacts with Danny. And Danny himself is just such an interesting character as well, because he's so young, but he also has the shining, you know, the Oogie Boogie shining. He also has the shining, so he can kind of see and hear and sense what's going on around him with the people around him and also with the hotel, but he doesn't quite understand it because of his age, you know? I think that from what I've read by Stephen King so far, the horror elements are a good part of the books, but his characters are what really shine, and I loved it. I loved it. It was so good. And I cried at the end because it is so sad. Also, if you've read the book and you want a really, really good adaptation, there is a TV miniseries. I think it's from like 1993 or 1997. I can't remember. Stephen King is a producer on that miniseries, and he actually makes like a little cameo at the end, but it is almost beat for beat with the book. So if you're wanting something like a really true adaptation, like I'm talking beat by beat baby, go check out the miniseries, the TV miniseries. Number 3, favorite book of the year, Kindred. So far, favorite book of the year so far, Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. Sci-fi historical fiction time travel book following this woman named Dana. She is a black woman. I think this is set in the 80s, and she is thrust back in time to the antebellum South to save this little boy named Rufus. Watching Dana have to deal with all of the complexities and the horrors and the bestiality and just the disgusting nature of human beings at that time. She's so strong, she's so determined to survive, and she's got so much compassion for the people around her, both the slaves and also, you know, believe it or not, the little boy Rufus that is a questionable creature. And some of the scenes in here are some of the most horrifying and gross and just gut-wrenching scenes that I have ever read, and it's just a fantastic read. Number 2 is the Harry Potter series, because I did a reread of the Harry Potter series. I didn't tell you that because I haven't really talked to you outside of a vlog since March. But I did a whole reread of the Harry Potter series. This is my first full reread of the series since I read it for the first time at 10 years old. So obviously some things have changed with me, maybe not with the book, obviously. I listened to the audiobooks narrated by Jim Dale, and Jim Dale did a fantastic job. I mean, reading this as a 25-year-old muggle made me feel like I was back at 10 years old, and just that magic that you feel when you're a child getting into these fantasy stories and just longing for the day when your Hogwarts letter arrives. You know, it's just, it called me back to the magic of my childhood, and I had such a fantastic time with it. But my number 1 book that I've read so far this year, and this is my favorite book that I've read so far this year, is Revival by Stephen King. This is following our main character, Jamie, over the course of 5 generations. We meet Jamie at the beginning when he is 9, I believe, all the way into his 50s where we leave him. When Jamie is a child, he's living in this really small town, and they have like one little Methodist church, and they're waiting for like a new pastor to come. Well, the new pastor is a young pastor with his young wife and their young son. His name is Reverend Charles Jacobs, and you get to watch as Charles Jacobs goes from being a really kind, religious man to confronting a tragedy that happens, and how that alters the course of Charles Jacobs' life, and also how that alters the course of Jamie's life. And throughout this 5 generational time span, we're constantly seeing them being drawn back together. This is Stephen King's take on cosmic horror, but there's also definitely some Frankenstein elements in it. There's some lightning situations. We're dealing with Charles Jacobs trying to find answers to questions that he probably doesn't want the answers to, and we get to see just how far this man is willing to take it being his questionable experiments with lightning, how far he is willing to take these experiments to find answers to the questions of the universe, pretty much. What happens after death? What is, you know, beyond this world? What does it look like? What does it feel like? Where do we go after we die? This incorporates one of my all-time favorite things in books to find, which is like religious corruption. I love a good religious corruption. I love a dirty pastor. Because we're following these characters from the time when they're very young. You know, Charles Jacobs is in his 20s, and obviously Jamie is like 9 or 10, all the way up until Charles Jacobs is an old man and Jamie is, you know, in his 50s, and how the struggles of their life have affected them, and how these certain events that have happened have altered the course of their lives, and how they continuously are drawn back together to the detriment of everything, of everyone involved. I don't know, it's just very good. It's very good. I mean, this is a book that is psychologically disturbing. It is physiologically disturbing. I mean, it focuses on faith and God and what would cause a man of faith to turn from God. It's just good. It's my favorite book of the year. I don't know how to accurately enunciate what I'm trying to say here, but it's thebomb.com. Now we have some questions from the mid-year book freakout tag. I'm going to go through these a little bit quicker because I've talked about the majority of these, you know, as we've gone through. Biggest disappointments. Number 1, Gerald's Game by Stephen King. I love the movie. I thought this was going to be something that's right up my alley. I loved the isolation of Misery, but this was just a little bit too isolated for me. I was tired of being in the heroine's head. The Friend Zone. This is just, it's just bad. It's just bad, and I really liked Abby Jimenez's other things. I just don't know. The romances that I've been picking up lately are just not working for me, and this is one of them. And then my number 3 disappointing, like, series of the year is The Chronicles of Narnia. I loved the movies when I was a kid, and the books were just, like, I feel like they would be good, really good if I was a super religious teenager and we read them in a youth group book club, but I am neither a youth, nor am I really that religious. So I felt like it was a lot of religious propaganda and racism, and some of the books were really good. Like The Magician's Nephew, 100% recommend that you read. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, just watch the movie because it's pretty much the exact same as the book. My biggest surprises of the year are Revival, which I cannot articulate how much I love this book. I love the characters, I love the setting, I love the conflict, I love the concept of a man of faith turning from God, I love the questions about, you know, what comes after death and the longing to know answers to questions that every human being asks. And Stephen King, he answers those questions in one way or another. I love this one. It was such a surprise for me. Another surprise was Dungeon Crawler Carl, which I read in January. This was surprising for me because this is a guy's book, okay? Let's just be honest. This is a guy's book. It's full of dirty, potty humor. It's full of guts and gore. My dog is barking, but we're just gonna keep going. And I thought that it would be a little bit too much for me because sometimes the boys will be boys. Potty humor is just a little bit too much for me as a female, you know, it's just a little bit too much for me. But this was fantastic. Okay, it was hilarious, it was dark, it was gritty, it was gory, and I love the potty humor. So maybe I'm just developing the humor of a 12-year-old boy. I'm not quite sure, but it was fantastic. It was great. And the other surprising read that I have that I'm getting ready to post a review for is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. I have this idea in my head that has been ingrained in me since high school English class, that classics need to be something that you kind of like explore and pick apart, and it just takes out all of the enjoyment for me. But I went into this expecting a story, and I got one, and I had so much fun with all of these just horrible people. These are the most unlikable characters doing nasty, nasty things. It was kind of like watching a soap opera. It was very dramatic. What is the next nasty thing that these nasty people are gonna do? And it was fantastic. It was so much fun. Favorite new author, and that has to be Stephen King. I told you I'm in my Stephen King renaissance. I don't think that as a character reader, I have ever read an author that can do what Stephen King does with characters. These characters that I have read about this year, they're real. I mean, they're just so real. I read Misery last year, absolutely loved it. It was probably my favorite book that I read in 2023, but Stephen King this year, I'm currently reading my fifth book by him this year. They're just unmatched at this point in my reading career. I have never come across another author that can do characters like Stephen King can do characters. I do think that he can be a little bit long-winded, and I think that his writing style is not for everyone because he can be a little bit long-winded and bloated, but I think that all of the hodgepodge and the extra just adds so much depth and reality to his characters. And I feel like BookTube, at least the people that I'm watching, are in their Stephen King renaissance as well. Favorite new character has to be Reverend Charles Jacobs, and he is from Revival, my number one book of the year. Reverend Charles Jacobs is such a fascinating character because I love this kind of, I love religious corruption, but I also love the questions that he asks in this book, and I love his journey as he goes from this ultra religious pastor to where he ends up at the end of the book, and just like the slow demise of this man who is just struggling with grief. A book that made you cry. Now, I haven't really been a sobber this year. Last year I was a sobber, but this year I've not really been that emotionally saddened by books. But the ending of The Shining, it was really, really hard, and the way that it is different from the movie makes it even harder. The most beautiful book that you've bought or acquired this year. So I finally got off of the waiting list for The Broken Binding, and the first trilogy that I've gotten from them is the Gentleman Bastards books, which they're a little bit difficult to hold up, but these are the sprayed edges. Like, come on now. Oh my god. Here's one of the in papers. Like, pardon me. Like, they're just so beautiful. They're beautiful, they're gorgeous, and I'm so excited to have them. And the last question that I'm going to answer from the mid-year book freakout tag is books that you need to read before the end of the year. I've got 3 books that I've kind of put on the back burner. Those are the ones that I'm going to include here, as well as one from the library. So I have Cell by Stephen King. I picked this up a couple months ago, put it back down. It's a post-apocalyptic book, and I just wasn't in the mood for post-apocalyptic. Can we speak? I don't know. I'm on page 138 of it. I definitely will be coming back to this at some point this year, especially since we're in the Renaissance. The other book that I'm in the middle of that I have not gone back to since probably March is A Time of Courage by John Gwynne. I'm on page 169 of this one. I put this one down because at the end of book 2, it started to feel like a little bit of a regurgitation of The Faithful and the Fallen, and I just haven't really gotten past that point. But I think that taking a little bit of time away from it maybe will help me to be able to differentiate the two series in my head. But like I said, it just started to feel a little bit too similar to Faithful and the Fallen. And then the other book that I started, and I almost finished it, was Dungeon Crawler Carl book 5. I think I'm right here. Maybe, perhaps, like 652. Like, I got so far into this book, but it got to the point where I was just not in the mood for this book specifically. This series is great, but I feel like ever since the first book, it's kind of been like a step down. All of the following books have kind of just been a step down. I don't know if it's because I've been listening to the audiobook for books 2 through 5, and the audiobooks are fantastic, but I just don't know if they're necessarily for me. And the other book that I kind of have to read because it's from the library is The Winter King by Bernard Cornwell. I have seen Laura from Fantasy Awash. I'll have her channel linked down below. She has just been goo goo gagaing over this series. She has no idea who I am, but just so you know, Laura, you have influenced at least one human being to read the series. This is from what she describes it, a kind of historical fiction, historical fantasy, focusing on the Arthurian legends, but we're not following King Arthur, we're following some other dude. But she's been going goo goo gaga over the series, and I have the first 3 books of Bernard Cornwell's Last Kingdom series on my shelf. Like, they've been there for years, but just hearing her talk about this, I got it from the library, so it's gonna be the next book that I read. That was the mid-year check-in. I've been sitting here for 43 minutes. Thank you to our co-host, Pedro, for his appearance in this wonderful video. Let me know down below what you guys have been reading this year. Let me know if you've read any of these books that I mentioned today, whether you agree or disagree. Let me know. What's your favorite book that you've read this year? What is your least favorite book that you've read this year? Are you hitting your goals? Are we hitting the goals, or are we falling behind? Let me know everything that you want to let me know down below, and I'll talk to you down there. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please make sure to join the NotSoAverageJo army. We are getting back into the filming thing, hopefully, maybe. I don't know. I've been sitting here for way too long, and I'm a little warm. My upper lip is perspirating a little bit, but I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your day, and I will see you next time.